Okay, and now we're going to look at the SmartGraphics. So if we open our VTP profile, we can see we've got a SmartGraphics with object ID 1. Now I'm going to compile it. So once the file is compiled, we go to the folder and we find we've got an SGD file that will need to be loaded into our Crestron program. So now we can go back to our C# program, and I'll go right click on the solution, and I'll add existing item, and I'll find the SGD file. So I'll go to my VTP file folder and I'll locate the SGD file. Yeah, and I'll go copy. Then I'll right click on it and I'll go to properties, and I'll change the copy to output directory. From do not copy, I'll change it to copy always. So every time the code is loaded, this SGD file gets loaded with it. Okay, so now we've got the SGD file. Now we need to specify the file path for this SGD file. So it's going to be a string, and I'm going to call it underscore SGD file path. Then the next variable that I need to add is going to be our smart object collection, and I'm going to call it underscore smart object collection. So now we need to go into our constructor, and I'm going to assign the file path to our SGD file path string. So I'm going to type path combine, it's going to be directory get application directory, and I'm going to put the name of the file, which is first program -part2.sgd. Okay, and next we need to load the smart object into our touch panel, and to do that we use a method called load smart object, and it takes one argument, and that's going to be our file path which we just created. So it's underscore SGD file path. Next we're going to assign the smart object collection to our touch panel smart object which we just loaded. Okay, and now we need to add an event handler into our code to handle the SmartGraphics signals. So first of all, we need to check if the SGD file exists. So I'm gonna add a quick check there, and then I'm gonna do a for each loop, which I'm gonna iterate through the smart object collection. And this collection contains a key value pair, so it's gonna be unsigned integer, and the value is gonna be the smart object. Okay, and now we're gonna for each pair value we're gonna handle this signal change. So now I'm gonna, in user interface, I'm gonna have a method called smart object sig change, and now I'm just gonna quickly add the else statement. So we're gonna print into our console if the SGD file has not been found. Now we go back to our user interface class, and we're gonna add a delegate. So I'm gonna type public delegate void, and it's gonna be for our smart graphics. So I'm gonna call it SmartGraphics change event handler, and I'm also gonna add a event which I'm gonna call it smart object event handler. Okay, and now I'm going to create a method which is going to get triggered from our control system class to trigger our event. So I'm going to call it smart object sig change, and it's going to have an event called smart object change event. And now if we go back to our control system class, we can see that method gets called when there's a signal change on the smart object. And now we're going to subscribe to our smart graphics change event. So I'll type user interface dot smart object change event, and I'm going to create a method called user interface smart object change event. So in here we can implement our code for any changes. I'm just going to move it down underneath my digital change event, just to kind of keep it all together. And again, we'll do the same thing we've done before. It's going to be a switch statement, device ID, and we're going to use our touch panel IP ID to trigger these. And we're going to call the method a TP handler SmartGraphics. Okay, and once that's done, I'm going to go back to my TP handler class and I'm going to create that method. So I'm going to go private void TP handler SmartGraphics. And again, we have a switch statement here. Okay, and now we need to add into our join numbers our SmartGraphics IDs. So I'll go to join numbers class and I'm going to create another enum, and I'm going to call it SmartGraphics ID. Okay, and we got just one graphics right now, so I'm just going to call it button list, and the ID is 1. So now I'm going to use SmartGraphics ID, and I'm going to use args.smart object args, and it will be the ID we get passed. So now I'm just going to cast it, and the first case statement is going to be if our smart object ID is buttonless. Okay, and now we're going to look at what happens when we press a button on our SmartGraphics object. So I'm going to print into a console, and I'm going to do button presses, and it's going to be type, number, and name. Okay, once it's all done, I'm going to compile this and I'm going to load it into our processor to see what we get. So once the program is loaded, okay, the program is loaded, and now if I press the button, as you can see, we're getting 3 signals. We've got U short and 2 booleans. I'm just gonna press this again just to make it clear on the console. Okay, so now we've got the first signal, we've got the U short output signal, its number is 1, and the name is item clicked, and then we've got 2 boolean values, which is obviously the button press and button release. Okay, and if I press a button 2, you can see the values changing, button 3, button 4, and as you can see, the U short values are the same, so that's not changing, is 1. We've got the boolean, which is 11, 12, 13 and 14, and obviously we've got the names, item press 1 to 4. So to better understand what's happening, we open the SGD file, and as you can see, we've got our button presses here, and our signal type digital is 11. So that kind of matches what we're seeing in our console. I'm going to look for item clicked, and as you can see, the Q for item click is 1, which corresponds to what we're getting in our console. And we can also check it in our simple windows. So as you can see, in our smart object ID 1, I've got item click, and it's the first item in the analog section. So that kind of corresponds with our Q1. And if you want to look for item held, yeah, that's Q2. So that matches what we're seeing in our SGD file and in our SmartGraphics in simple windows. And now we're going to implement the interlock method for our SmartGraphics. So I'm going to go to the user interface class, and I'm going to create a method called interlock. And these methods will have multiple parameters. So first one's going to be our join numbers, SmartGraphics buttons. Obviously I haven't got that created in my join number class, so I'm going to go here and I create a public enum called SmartGraphics buttons. And now I can go back to my interlock method and I can add SmartGraphics button as my first parameter, and I'm going to call it setIndex. And my next two parameters are very similar to my other interlock, which were obviously digital join numbers, start index and end index. But obviously these are SmartGraphics, so I'm going to use join numbers, SmartGraphics buttons, and that's going to be my start index. And the next parameter is going to be my SmartGraphics buttons again, and it's going to be end index. And we're going to use Smart Object Event Arcs. The last parameter is going to be our touch panel. Okay, and after that I'm just going to do the same thing that I've done in my previous methods. I'm going to check if the touch panel is not null. And now we can use our arcs parameter and smart object as, which returns the smart object that is associated with this event. So, and now we can carry on as previously. So we're looking for a digital signal, so it'll be a Boolean input, and we're looking for signal name or signal number. So we need to go back to our SGD file, and we're gonna have to find the button presses we want to track. So we know it's a input Q12 is our item 1 selected, and we got item 2 selected, item 3. So if we go to our simple program and we select the digital tab, you can see for feedback we need to use item 1 selected. So that kind of corresponding with our SGD file. So what we need to use in here is the signal name. So it will be item space, and we're going to use the set index as our number, and it'll be selected. I will go bool value, and that will go equal to true. Okay, once that's done, now we need to implement reset interlock method. So again, it's going to be very similar to our earlier version, which obviously takes digital, but in here we're going to use the SmartGraphics buttons. So that'll be our start index and end index. So I'm just going to copy these parameters and going to paste it into our reset interlock method. And now we're going to implement it very similar to what we've done in our previous reset interlock method. So we're already checking for the touch panel, so we don't necessarily need to check it again. So what I'm going to do, we're going to create a for loop, and I'm going to loop through all the buttons between the start index and end index. Okay, so now we've got the interlock method ready. Now we need to use it in our handler class. So just to show you, as we saw previously, the signal on an item click, the number is 1, which is obviously on our SmartGraphics is the first item on there. So that will return an analog value of the button that was pressed. So we can use this to track our button presses on the SmartGraphics. So what I'm going to create a variable called item clicked, which is going to be ushort, and I'm going to assign it to our smart object arcs ushort output. Which is based on item clicked. Okay, and now once we got that, now we can use a switch statement. based on an item clicked, and the first case is going to be our join numbers, SmartGraphics buttons, button 1. So, and obviously it doesn't like it because we need to cast it from uShort to join numbers, SmartGraphics buttons. Okay, so now we can use our interlock method. Okay, so we got the methods implemented, but now we've got one issue. So if we go back to our user interface and we see that our interlock method, the first parameter is SmartGraphics buttons, but if you try to use it as a string, it will use the name of the enum instead of its value. So to get around it, I'm going to create a uShort variable called index, and I'm going to assign it to our set index, but I will have to obviously cast it. And now I can use that value in my Boolean input collection. Okay, and now I just need to add the reset interlock inside my interlock method to deselect all buttons first and then select the button that was pressed. If we go back to our TP handler method, I just need to handle the other button presses on our SmartGraphics. Okay, I'll just change all the names so it corresponds with each button press. I'll load the code, and once the code is loaded, we can test it. And as you can see, our interlock on the SmartGraphics object works perfectly. So now we've got our interlock method working. I'm going to add a use indirect text on our SmartGraphics to set text of each button through our program. And to do that, I need to go back to my program into the user interface class, and I'm going to create a set text method, which could be slightly different to our previous one. In our previous set text method, we used a touch panel and string input collection to set the value. For SmartGraphics, this doesn't work because we need to actually use the SmartGraphics collection. So we're gonna have to add that into our user interface class. So I'm gonna add this as an argument, and I'm gonna update our constructor to reflect this change, and I'm gonna create a private variable for our smart object collection, and I'm gonna assign this collection which get passed from our control system class. And now we got our smart object collection in this class, and we can use it to set text on our smart objects. So I'm going to use that, and because it's a collection, so I need to use ID, and I'm going to have to cast it to uShort, and it's going to be our string input we want to set to. So if I open the simple windows again, you can see in the serial tab we got set item 1, and if we go to our SGD file, same, we can see set item 1 text. So that's what we're going to use. I'm going to use index text, that'll be string value, and we're going to assign it to our text parameter. Okay, and now we can go back to our control system class, and in our initialize system method we can add the set text for each of our buttons. So I'm going to do compile it, load the code, and as you can see, our first button has got a text button 5, so we've got an issue in our code. So let's go back and have a look what the problem is. Yeah, and as you can see, our SmartGraphics join numbers are all set to button 1, so that would explain the error. So I'm going to recompile it, load it back to the processor. Okay, and now we'll see if this worked or not. Yay, here we go. That's better. So that works as expected. Perfect.